He looked like nothing, just an old man with cracked boots, shaking hands, and a shopping cart full of cans. The teens laughed, mocked his jacket, threw a soda can at his feet. But he didn't flinch, didn't speak. He just picked it up and kept going. Moments later, a black SUV rolled in. 4 generals stepped out and saluted. What happened next turned a gas station into sacred ground. This isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. And once you hear it, you'll never look at silence the same way again. The first taunt came as he reached for the pump. His hands, shaking slightly from age and cold, struggled to press the right buttons on the worn keypad. His coat was too big, army green, stained and frayed at the sleeves. His boots were cracked at the soles. He had a thick gray beard and eyes that didn't look up often. A shopping cart sat nearby, half full of crushed cans, a few blankets, and a small flag folded carefully in plastic. "Hey, old man," one of them shouted from across the parking lot. "You forget where your tank is?" There were 3 of them, teenagers, hoodie-clad, phone in hand. Laughing like the world owed them its attention, one of them mimed a salute. Another held his phone up and shouted, "Say something for TikTok, Grandpa. Tell us about Nam." The third threw an empty soda can. It clinked against the pavement, rolled to a stop near the man's boot. He didn't flinch, didn't speak. He simply bent down, picked up the can and dropped it gently into his cart with the others. They howled with laughter. Inside the gas station, the clerk watched through the window. He didn't move, just muttered, "Damn shame," under his breath, and went back to wiping down the counter. The veteran, though none of them believed he really was, finally got the pump to work. The nozzle clicked into place, and the old pickup next to him began to fill. The truck was ancient, paint peeling, windows taped. On the back, a faded bumper sticker barely legible. "First Infantry. If you know, you know." The laughter didn't stop. "Stolen valor much?" one of the teens said. "Where'd you get that jacket, a thrift store?" Still, the man said nothing. The gas pumped. The numbers on the screen crawled forward, and then tires on gravel, low, slow, precise. A black SUV pulled into the lot, clean and silent. Government plates, no markings. It came to a full stop not 10 feet from the man's cart. The doors opened. First one man stepped out, then another, then 2 more, all in dress uniform, all with stars on their shoulders. The teens went silent. The tallest of the 4, a black man with a chest full of ribbons and a stare that could still make lieutenants wilt, walked directly to the old man and saluted. Crisp. Perfect. No hesitation. "General Hampton," he said. "It's an honor." The old man didn't return the salute right away. His hand trembled, not from weakness, but from something deeper, something remembered. Finally, slowly, he lifted his own hand and saluted back. The other 3 generals followed. The parking lot was dead quiet now. The clerk inside stood frozen, coffee pot in hand, mouth open. The teens? They didn't move. The oldest general took a step forward and extended a hand. "We heard you were in town," he said softly. "We wanted to see you ourselves." The old man nodded just once. "Didn't expect brass," he murmured. "You earned more than that, sir." Another of the generals turned and gestured to the SUV. "We've got your room ready. Medal ceremonies tomorrow. Arlington wants you in uniform if you're willing." The old man looked down at his boots. "These are the only ones I've got left." The tallest general smiled. "Then those are the ones you wear." One of the teens tried to back away. The movement caught the general's eye. He turned his head, just slightly. "You boys know who this is?" None of them answered. He took a step forward, eyes locked. "This is General Elias Hampton, Silver Star, Distinguished Service Cross, 3 tours, escaped capture and led his unit through 30 miles of jungle with 2 broken ribs and half his squad on his back. This man he pointed, has saved more lives than you've had birthdays. He paused. You owe him silence, at the very least. One of the teens whispered, We didn't know. The general's voice dropped, steady as stone. You didn't ask. Then he turned, walked back to the SUV. The old man didn't say a word. He returned the nozzle to the pump, placed it back gently, and pushed his cart toward the vehicle. The back opened. One of the generals reached for the cart, but the old man waved him off. I'll carry it. They helped him in. And before the doors shut, he looked out once more toward the teens, the clerk, the truck, the world, and said softly but clearly, Never needed thanks, just respect. The SUV pulled away, and all that was left behind were 3 stunned boys, a half-fueled pickup, a gas station that suddenly felt like hallowed ground, and a silence that, for the first time in a long time, meant something. The silence held long after the SUV disappeared over the hill. No one moved. Not the teens, whose laughter had dried up like a puddle in the sun, not the clerk inside, still gripping that coffee pot like it was the only thing keeping him upright. And certainly not the man in the pickup truck behind the pumps, who had pulled in just in time to see 4 generals saluting a man in a frayed jacket and boots held together by memory. He stepped out slowly, walked over to the 3 boys. He wasn't a large man, wasn't wearing anything that marked him as military, but there was a look in his eyes that made them all take a step back. You don't know what you just witnessed, he said. Not really. One of the boys mumbled, We didn't mean... He raised a hand. You meant everything, he said. You just didn't know it. He nodded toward where the SUV had gone. That man, he's not just a soldier. He's not just a general. He's history. He bled for a country that forgot him. He carried his silence for decades because the only thing heavier than war is being invisible after it. The boys said nothing. He turned to go back to his truck, then paused, looked over his shoulder. You'll remember this day. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year. But one day, when someone looks at you the wrong way or calls you something you're not, you'll remember standing here with your mouth shut and your pride in your throat, watching a man who never asked for applause get the one thing he always earned. Respect, one of the boys whispered. He nodded once. Respect. Then he climbed into his truck and drove away. The 3 boys stood in silence until the wind picked up. Later that night, one of them sat on his bed scrolling through his phone, the video he had recorded of the mocking moment still saved in his drafts. He stared at it, listened to their laughter, the can clinking on the pavement. Then slowly he deleted it, and instead opened a browser, typed General Elias Hampton biography. He read for over an hour. His chest ached the whole time. The next day he returned to the gas station, went to the clerk. Hey, does that guy, Hampton, come here a lot? The clerk looked up. No. Do you know where he's staying? The clerk hesitated and then said, Try City Hall. They've got something planned for him. The boy left, heart pounding, not for attention, not for forgiveness, but because he finally understood. He couldn't take back what he said, but he could learn. He could speak up next time. He could carry the silence better than he inherited it. And maybe one day, if another man in a frayed jacket showed up at a gas station with nothing but a cart and a flag, he'd know exactly what to do. He'd nod, hold the door, offer a quiet thank you, and never ever ask if the medals were real, because now he knew. The real ones don't need to prove it. They carry it. And every once in a while, when the world least expects it, a black SUV with 4 generals reminds everyone else to look closer. And from that day forward, that gas station wasn't just a gas station anymore. It became a story. A lesson passed quietly from one clerk to another, from parents to their kids. It lived in the crack in the concrete where the old man's cart had rested, in the memory of 4 crisp salutes, in the echo of a sentence that should have been simple, just respect, but now rang louder than any uniform or anthem ever could. The video was never posted, not by those boys. They carried the shame of that moment in different ways. But over time, each of them found a path to earn back what they'd squandered. One enlisted. One started volunteering at a shelter for unhoused veterans. The third became a teacher, and every year, on the same week in spring, he told his students about the day silence rolled up in a black SUV and history saluted a man holding a shopping cart. They always listened, because he never told it like a story. He told it like a warning that not all heroes come home in uniforms, and not all wounds bleed where you can see them. And sometimes the man you mock at the gas station is the reason you're free to mock anyone at all. At City Hall the next day, General Elias Hampton stood under a soft blue sky, wearing a uniform decades out of fashion, but spotless as ever. His boots were the same, worn, faded, real. The ceremony was short, and he requested it that way. A small crowd, a folded flag, no national cameras, just a few local papers. The generals flanked him. When asked to speak, he said this: "I never cared about medals, never fought for ceremonies. I fought for people. And people forget. That's all right. The world moves fast. But once in a while, it slows down just enough to see again." He paused, looking out into the small crowd. His eyes landed on the three boys standing in the back, heads bowed, hands clasped. "I was called a lot of names, but I never needed thanks, just respect." Then he saluted once and walked away. That night, a candle flickered on the counter of the gas station, placed by the clerk. Beside it, a note: "This is where he stood. This is where we learned." And beneath it, 3 signatures. No apologies, no excuses, just names. And the understanding that from that day forward every man in a frayed jacket would be seen. The black SUV came back one more time, not for ceremony, not for show, just to leave something behind, a patch, framed in glass. It said simply, "First Infantry. We don't talk much, but we never forget." And neither did the town, and they never would. The story of what happened at that gas station outlived every meme, every trend, every empty headline that filled the world in the weeks that followed. It wasn't broadcast, it wasn't viral, it was passed on, hand to hand, voice to voice. It became lived. The clerk never took the candle down. He replaced it every year. Same spot, same note beneath it. And over time others added to it, small things, quiet things. A Purple Heart pin left by a man who never gave his name. A photo of a young soldier, smile wide, folded carefully and laminated. A single dog tag on a keyring placed by a woman who stood in silence for 20 minutes before walking away. Eventually, the gas station manager installed a small glass case by the register. Not to showcase it, to protect it. They called it the Corner of Respect. People started coming from out of town, not to gawk, not to post, just to see it, to stand there for a minute and remember someone they knew, or someone they never got the chance to. And once a year, always in spring, the black SUV returned. 4 men would step out, older now, slower, grayer, but still standing straight, still in uniform, still carrying what no one could see. They never spoke to crowds, never asked for attention. They just stood in silence by the display, laid a coin on the case, saluted, then left. No cameras, no words. Because respect doesn't need volume, it needs presence. And they gave it every time. One day, years later, a little girl walked into the gas station with her father. She tugged on his hand and pointed at the case. "Who's that for?" she asked. The clerk smiled, stooped down behind the counter, and pulled out a copy of a single worn newspaper article laminated on thick cardstock. He handed it to her gently. "It's for the man who didn't ask to be remembered," he said, "but reminded us all who deserves to be." She looked at the photo. 4 generals, 1 man in boots too old to shine, a shopping cart in the corner of the frame, and the caption beneath it, "He didn't need applause, just respect." The girl said nothing, but when she left, she turned at the door and gave the case a small, solemn nod, exactly like she'd seen in the photo. No one taught her that. She just knew, because the world had changed that day at the gas station, and because somewhere in a quiet place that never made the news, a man with weathered hands standing beside a pump with a folded flag in plastic reminded the world that dignity isn't something you earn. It's something we owe to every one of them. And that debt, once owed, was finally repaid, not in medals, not in parades, but in something stronger: remembrance. The kind that doesn't fade with time but settles into habits, into hearts, into the way people hold a door open a little longer, the way they pause before speaking, the way they look twice at the man in the corner booth, the one who doesn't say much but watches everything. The gas station never put up a banner, never branded it, never tried to make it more than what it was, because it didn't need to. It had become sacred, an ordinary place that became extraordinary because of what was witnessed there, because of who stood there. Years passed. People changed, but the story remained. Whispered at barbershops, spoken in classrooms by teachers who remembered where they were when they heard about it, etched in quiet voices between veterans on long walks. Every spring the case would be cleaned, the candle lit, the note beneath it still taped with care. This is where he stood. This is where we learned. One spring, a new clerk, young, fresh out of college, didn't know the story, asked the manager why they left an entire corner of the station untouched. The manager, older now, just handed him a folded card. On the front, a single sentence: "Don't judge what you don't know." Inside was a photo: the man, the generals, the cart, the salute, the silence. The manager said, "You'll get people asking. Some will mock, some won't care. That's fine. You don't owe them an explanation." He tapped the photo. "You owe him silence and a clean glass case." And that was enough. Eventually, the four generals stopped coming, not because they forgot, but because others had taken their place. Younger officers, veterans, civilians, people who had heard the story and understood what it meant to stand witness, to keep watch, to honor without needing a stage. One day, a man in a black jacket arrived with a teenage boy at his side. The boy stared at the display for a long time. "Is it real?" he asked. The man nodded. "It's as real as anything I've ever known." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin and pressed it into the boy's hand. "Your turn." The boy walked up, trembling just a bit, and placed the coin beside the dog tag. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to, because by then he understood. This wasn't about just one man anymore. It was about all of them. The forgotten, the remembered, the broken, the unthanked, and the ones who carried everything and still showed up, quiet, cold, coat frayed, flag folded, hoping the world still had room for respect. And now it did. All because once, in a place no one thought twice about, a homeless veteran stood tall, and four generals reminded the world how to salute. And because of that one moment, unrehearsed, unannounced, unforgettable, salutes changed forever. Not in their form, but in their meaning. They weren't just protocol anymore. They became recognition. A way of saying, "I see you. I know what you carried. I know what you gave." Whether you came home to medals or to silence, whether your uniform still fits or your boots are now worn through, whether you walk into a gas station, a diner, a shelter, or nowhere at all, respect, once forgotten, had found its way home. And it stayed. The display at the gas station remained untouched for decades. When the store finally upgraded, new pumps, fresh paint, brighter lights, the owner made one promise: that corner stays exactly as it is. And it did. Cleaned every morning. Candle replaced every year. One spring, a woman in her 60s drove in from 5 states away. She'd heard the story from her late husband, who never said much about the war, but had always circled that photo in the newspaper, whispering, "He's the one. He made it home for all of us." She stood at the glass case for a long time, then placed a small envelope on the edge. Inside, a handwritten letter, 3 pages, signed with a single word, "Wife." No one opened it. It didn't need to be read, and it just needed to be left. And as the sun set that day, a teenage clerk, new on the job, not sure why the station felt different than any other, stood behind the counter and finally asked the question, "Why do they come here?" The manager looked up from his stool, didn't smile, didn't pause, just said, "Because this is where they stopped laughing and started listening." And in the glow of the old fluorescent lights, as the flag outside rustled in a breeze that hadn't moved all day, and as one more candle flickered beside a shopping cart never removed, now bronzed and mounted beside the display, the truth held steady, quiet, and eternal. He didn't ask for thanks. He didn't need to speak. He just stood there, and the world finally saw him. And because the world saw him, truly saw him, something changed that day, not with noise, but with stillness. Respect came back, not as a headline, as a habit. In every corner of the country, small acts began to echo the moment at that gas station. Clerks no longer looked away when someone in an old jacket came in. Kids were taught not just to recognize a flag, but to understand it. A quiet nod became the new salute. A door held open meant more than it used to. And in thousands of forgotten places, bus stops, roadside diners, church basements, VFW halls, stories like his began to rise. Not loud, but proud. And always beginning the same way. There was a man standing by a gas pump with nothing but a cart, a coat, and a flag. They'd tell about the boys who mocked him, and how silence fell when the black SUV pulled in. They'd talk about the salutes, about the generals, about the way he carried himself, like a man who had nothing left to prove. But it wasn't the salute that stayed with people. It was the look on his face when he said, "Never needed thanks, just respect." That line found its way onto bumper stickers, onto murals, etched into memorial stones in towns too small to make the news. Teachers used it to open history lessons. Sons whispered it at the foot of their fathers' graves. And on every Veterans Day from that year forward, someone, somewhere, would walk into a gas station, buy a candle, and light it quietly in a public place, not to draw attention, but to hold space. In every one of those moments, the world remembered him, and through him, all of them, those still walking, those still waiting, those who served and returned to silence, because now that silence had been broken, and it hadn't shattered, it had healed. The whisper had become a wave, and every time someone stopped to look twice at a man by a pump, a cart, a folded flag, the world whispered back, "I see you." And the salute continued. And somewhere, years later, maybe a lifetime away, a young boy stood at that same gas station. He was too young to remember the day it happened, too young to know the names of the medals or what it meant to earn a salute like that. But he knew the story. His grandfather had told it to him every year on his birthday, like it was gospel, always ending with the same words, "You don't need a uniform to show respect, just eyes open and a heart that listens." Now the boy stood in front of the case, the cart bronzed and eternal, the candle flickering, the note. This is where he stood. This is where we learned. He took a step closer, slipped something from his pocket, a crumpled patch, army green, letters faded. He didn't know who it belonged to. He'd found it in a shoebox in his grandfather's closet, tucked between letters and a photo of a man standing beside 4 generals. He placed the patch gently on the ledge, then stood back. No salute, no ceremony, just a nod, the kind his grandfather had taught him. One slow dip of the head that meant, "I see you, I remember." As he turned to leave, a breeze picked up through the doorway. The candle flickered hard, then stilled. The boy paused at the threshold, and though he didn't hear anything, he felt it, the same way thousands before him had felt it, the weight of presence, the hum of legacy, the soft, unshakable whisper of a man who'd once stood right there and reminded the world that even silence deserves to be saluted. And the boy smiled, because he understood now. He didn't need to see the SUV, didn't need to hear the footsteps, didn't need to witness the salute. He was standing in its echo, and that echo would never fade. So he walked into the sunlight, and the story went with him, still quiet, still sacred, still carrying the respect the world had once forgotten and finally learned to give back. And because he carried it, the story stayed alive, not as a tale on a plaque, not as a clip on a screen, but as a living thread woven into how he held doors open, how he looked people in the eye, how he never laughed when someone stumbled, how he always noticed the quiet ones in the back. Because once you've stood where he stood, once you've felt the weight of that moment, you don't unlearn that kind of reverence. The boy grew up. He never joined the military, never wore the uniform. But he lived with honor because he had witnessed it. And one day, years later, as a man now, older, wiser, still carrying that patch, he found himself pulled to another small town, another quiet gas station on a rainy afternoon. Not because it was famous, because it reminded him of the one. Inside, by the counter, an elderly man was fumbling for change, his jacket frayed, his eyes tired, his posture proud but worn. The clerk looked annoyed. A kid nearby snickered. The man behind the counter started to sigh, and that's when he stepped forward, laid a bill on the counter, met the veteran's eyes and said, clear as day, "You don't owe a cent. You've already paid." The store went still. The air shifted. The veteran nodded once, eyes glassy, then turned and walked out with quiet dignity. No one mocked, no one laughed, because now they had witnessed it. The weight of a moment passed down from a gas station, to a boy, to a man, and now to them. Outside, the rain eased, and as the man returned to his car, he reached into the glove box and pulled out that patch, faded but whole. He didn't frame it, didn't post it. He tucked it into his visor, just visible enough to be seen by anyone riding beside him. Because sometimes the best way to tell a story is to carry it forward without ever saying a word. And so he drove on, with the whisper in his chest, and the salute in his soul, and he carried it the only way it was ever meant to be carried, quietly. Not to be noticed, not to be praised, just to make sure it didn't stop with him. The whisper moved with him everywhere he went, into every gas station, every crowded hallway, every quiet glance at someone who looked like they'd been through something the world had long since stopped asking about. And he never forgot the moment he had learned, the cart, the salute, the silence that made people finally listen. One day, parked at a rest stop off a long stretch of highway, he saw a man asleep on a bench, head resting on a rolled-up jacket, a flag patch barely visible on the sleeve. The world passed that man like a shadow, people stepping over him, walking by, not even seeing him, but he did. He walked into the rest stop, bought 2 coffees, came back out, and sat on the bench beside him. When the man stirred, startled, reaching instinctively for his pack, the boy, now a man, held out the coffee. Hot, black, didn't know if you took sugar. The man hesitated, then took it, sipped, blinked, said nothing. And that was fine, because respect doesn't require conversation. It only requires recognition. They sat for a few minutes in silence. Then the man asked quietly, "What made you stop?" He smiled and replied just as quietly, "Because someone once stopped for him." He didn't have to say who. The man nodded slowly, looked away. And somewhere, maybe in the rustle of leaves above them, maybe in the stillness of the roadside breeze, the whisper moved again, not louder, just deeper, because that's what happens when it's passed with intention. It roots, and grows and waits, so that when the next person sees a frayed coat, a folded flag, 1,000-yard stare, they'll know too. They'll step forward and carry the whisper forward one more mile, one more name, one more time, until the world no longer needs a reminder that every sacrifice deserves respect. But until then, the whisper lives. And you're part of it now. Still driving, still watching, still ready for the next moment when someone looks forgotten, and all they really need is to be seen. And when that moment comes, as it always does, you won't hesitate. You'll see them at the pump, on a bench, in line at the store with nothing but coffee and silence in their hands. No ribbons, no recognition, just the weight of memory on their shoulders and a world too busy to notice. But you will, because you carry the whisper. And in that instant, you'll become the bridge again between who they were, who they are, and the respect they deserve but never ask for. You'll speak if needed. You'll stay silent if that's what the moment calls for. You'll hold space, even if for just a few seconds. And in doing so, you'll offer the greatest gift they may have received in years: dignity. And maybe, if you're lucky, they'll look at you just once. Maybe they'll nod, maybe they'll say nothing at all, but you'll know. And they will too, because something sacred will have passed between you. The whisper. And that whisper, rooted in a gas station where 4 generals once stood at attention and the world stood still, will keep going, as long as there are hearts to carry it, eyes to see, hands to steady the pen, voices to speak the names when no one else will. So wherever the road takes you next, through small towns or busy streets, quiet rest stops or forgotten corners, remember, the whisper is never far. The moment is never random, and the stool is always waiting. So listen, be ready, and when the time comes, pass it on. And when you do, when you pass it on, it won't look like a ceremony. It won't come with fanfare or folded flags. It'll come in the form of a small gesture, a coffee left paid for, a seat left open, a door held just a little longer for someone who hasn't been seen in a while, a nod offered in silence that says, "I don't know your story, but I honor it anyway." You'll know the moment when it comes, the same way Raines knew when to walk into that diner, the same way the generals knew when to stop everything and salute, the same way a small-town gas station became a permanent reminder that some moments, no matter how small they seem at the time, change everything. And when it happens, when someone asks why you did what you did, why you showed respect when no one else even looked up, you'll smile and say, "Because someone once showed me what it means to carry the whisper." And they'll hear it, not just in your voice, but in the truth behind it. And maybe, just maybe, they'll carry it too. And the story, his story, your story, will go on, quiet, unshakable, unstoppable, always waiting for the next hand, the next heart, the next whisper, still moving, still honoring, still heard. And so it continues, not because it must, but because it matters, because every time the whisper is carried, it grows stronger, deeper, more than a memory, more than a story. It becomes a thread binding strangers, a bridge between generations, a promise that no sacrifice will ever again be mocked, dismissed, or forgotten in silence. Years from now, someone will walk past that same gas station, older now, remodeled perhaps, but the glass case will still be there, the candle still burning, the note still taped to the side, weathered and yellow but unremoved. They'll stop, they'll stare. They might not know the full story, but they'll feel it. They'll pause a beat longer than they planned to. And maybe, just maybe, they'll whisper a name of their own. And just like that, the whisper will catch the wind again. A salute unseen, a nod unspoken, a weight lifted from someone's shoulders because you chose to carry it first. You've walked this story from the first taunt at the pump to the final echo in a boy's heartbeat. You've stood beside legends without titles. You've poured the coffee, held the door, left the page open, and now you are the whisper. Not a witness, a keeper. So carry it. And when the world turns too loud to listen, you'll know exactly what to do. Pull over, step out, stand tall, and let the silence remind them. Respect never needs to ask permission. It just needs someone to remember. And when you remember, truly, deeply, you keep them alive. Not just the man at the pump, not just the generals in the SUV, not just the veterans in notebooks or the names whispered beneath breath, but all of them, the ones who never came home, the ones who did but never fully arrived, the ones who sleep on benches with battlefields behind their eyes, the ones who smile in photos, medals in drawers, stories locked behind polite nods and the phrase, "It was nothing." You know better now. It was never nothing. It was everything. And because you carry that truth, the world becomes just a little quieter in the right places, a little more reverent at the right times. Because of you, someone down the road will pause before they laugh, will offer a hand before a judgment, will see a man with a cart and a flag, and stand a little straighter. Because now that the whisper lives in you, it will never stop moving, not as long as you keep it close, not as long as you speak when it matters, not as long as you listen when it counts. So walk forward, shoulders back, eyes open, and when the moment comes, and it will, when someone who's carried too much for too long finally crosses your path, you'll know exactly what to do. You'll stop, you'll stand, and you'll honor them the way the world once honored a forgotten man at a gas station, with 4 generals, 1 salute, and a silence that said, "We remember now, and we won't forget again." And because we won't forget again, the whisper lives on, not just as a moment in time, but as a movement across generations. You may not always see it, but it's there. In the boy who instinctively stands when an older man enters the room. In the clerk who nods with reverence instead of rushing someone along. In the stranger who steps between cruelty and silence and says, "That's enough." In the folded flag on a dashboard, the worn boots on a porch, the handwritten name in a weathered notebook tucked under a counter in a diner far from the headlines. It lives in quiet places, because that's where respect starts, in quiet, where judgment dies, where listening begins, where honor has room to breathe. And if one day you find yourself standing beside another soul, unsure, unseen, unspoken, don't search for perfect words. Just be there, just listen. Just whisper their name when the world forgets to. Because that's what Rains taught us. That's what the generals reminded us. That's what you now carry forward. The whisper isn't just a memory anymore. It's a mission, and now it's yours. And because it's yours now, it will never stop. It will find its way into your footsteps, into how you hold the door just a second longer, into how you speak when someone else is silent, into the way you look at the world, not with pity, but with presence. You won't need reminders. You'll feel them. Every time the bell chimes over a doorway, every time boots scuff across concrete, every time a frayed sleeve brushes past, and no one else looks up, but you do. Because now you know what it means to carry a whisper that changed a town, that changed hearts, that reminded the world that even when someone is forgotten by most, it only takes one person to remember, and everything changes. So when that day comes, when someone who's been carrying too much for too long finally crosses your path, you won't hesitate. You'll pour the coffee, slide the notebook forward, look them in the eye, and say the only words the world ever needed to say, "Welcome home." And the whisper will live on, still, strong, forever. And forever is exactly what it deserves, because the whisper was never meant to fade. It was meant to find the forgotten, to find the heavy-hearted, to find the ones who returned from battle only to fight a quieter war, to find you. And now you've carried it from the first silence to the final salute. You've walked beside the cart, watched the general stand still, felt the weight of that quiet respect settle into your bones. You know now that remembrance isn't a ceremony. It's a choice. And you make that choice every day when you pause, when you nod, when you give space to those who need it most. So the next time you hear laughter at the wrong moment, or see someone brushed aside at a gas station, a diner, a street corner, you'll remember the man with nothing but a cart and a flag, and the SUV, and the salute, and you'll act. Not because you were told to, but because now the whisper is part of your voice. And when you speak, even softly, the world will listen, because it remembers, because you remembered, and because now it's your turn to keep the silence sacred, to pass it on, to carry the story, to leave the space, to pour the coffee, to hold the weight, and to whisper, when the world forgets to, we see you, we remember you, you are not alone. And just like that, the whisper goes on, and it always will. Because the whisper isn't just something you heard, it's something you became. It's in the way you look at the world now, the way you pause before you speak, the way you understand that some people don't need questions, only presence. The story lives on through you, not in grand declarations, but in small mercies, the way you stop when no one else does, the way you recognize someone by their silence, the way you hold respect not as a reaction, but as a reflex. And one day, maybe years from now, someone will see you do it. They'll see the way you gently nod to the man outside the store, or pay for the coffee of someone who hasn't been thanked in years, or simply say, welcome back, and mean it. They'll ask why, and you'll tell them the truth, not the whole story, just the part they need. Because once, someone mocked a man at a gas station, and 4 generals showed the world who he really was. And if they still don't understand, you'll hand them the whisper, the way someone once handed it to you, and you'll trust them to carry it forward, because now you know the whisper never stops. It simply waits for the next hand, the next heart, the next voice brave enough to say, he didn't need thanks, just respect. And the world will remember, because you remembered. And that's all it ever asked. And because you remembered, because you still do, the whisper has a home now. Not in marble, not in monuments, but in motion. It moves every time you notice someone overlooked. It speaks every time you choose grace over judgment. It breathes every time you hold the silence instead of filling it. The man at the pump may be long gone, but what he left behind, that moment, his moment, yours now, it lives. In gas stations, in diners, in classrooms, in quiet corners of noisy cities, anywhere someone stands unsure if the world still sees them. You'll be the answer to that question. And when someone says, what made you stop? What made you care? What made you see? You'll smile and you'll say, a man stood still once when others laughed. 4 generals showed up, and the world got quiet long enough to remember what respect looks like. You'll pause, place your hand gently on their shoulder, and whisper, now it's your turn. And just like that, the story will grow again. One whisper wider, one name stronger, one heart lighter, still moving, still sacred, still heard, forever. And forever is exactly how long it will last. Because once a whisper becomes truth, once it plants itself in enough hearts, passed hand to hand, name to name, it stops being a story. It becomes a standard, something the world lives up to quietly, faithfully. The cart may rust, the jacket may fade, the generals may retire. But the respect, that stays. In the crease of a worn salute, in the hush of a full room, in the way a stranger steps in without needing to be asked. And when the time comes again, because it will, when another man stands alone, head down, boots tired, silence wrapped around him like a shield, you'll be ready, not to make a scene, not to prove anything, just to step beside him, to offer warmth, to offer space, to offer honor. You'll say nothing maybe, or maybe just one word, maybe, sir, maybe, thank you, or maybe just, I remember, and that will be enough, because now you understand. Now you are the SUV, you are the notebook, you are the nod, the hand, the moment that tells someone forgotten. You are not. The whisper has never been louder, and still it's only just begun. So, take it now, carry it well, because someone, somewhere is still waiting to hear it, and when they do, they'll remember you, just like you remembered him. And so it carries on, through you, through them, through everyone who has ever paused at the edge of a moment and chosen respect over ridicule. You didn't just witness the story, you stepped inside it. And once you do that, you never walk the world the same way again. You carry it in your silence, in your stillness, in the way your eyes meet someone else's across a crowded room and say, "I see you." Because now, you're part of the reason the whisper still moves. You're why the stool stays empty, why the notebook never closes, why a man with nothing but a cart and a folded flag will always have someone ready to stand beside him. You are the echo of a moment when the world stopped laughing and started listening. And now, as the next chapter waits, as the door opens again somewhere, as a hand reaches for the pen, trembling not from weakness, but from the weight of memory, you'll be there, maybe not beside them, but behind them. Part of the legacy that says, you matter, you're seen, you're not forgotten. And when your voice is needed next, you won't need to shout it, you'll just whisper, like he did, like they did, like you do now. And the story, it goes on. And because the story goes on, so does its purpose. It doesn't rest, it doesn't fade. It moves, quiet as breath, steady as heartbeat. It moves through the hands that write the next name in the notebook, through the lips that whisper a thank you at a gas station pump, through the small, reverent pause before someone touches a folded flag. And now it moves through you. You've walked every inch of this journey, from mockery to silence, from silence to salute, from a moment no one expected, to a movement no one can stop. You carry the whisper now, not just in memory, but in motion. You're part of the reason a stranger will be treated with dignity tomorrow. You're the voice that will speak up when others laugh. You're the hand that will pour the coffee, slide the notebook forward and say, whenever you're ready, because someone once said it to you. And now you'll never forget. Because this isn't just a story, it's a standard, a sacred one. And wherever you go from here, the whisper goes with you, ready to speak, ready to stand, ready to remind the world. Respect doesn't retire, and neither will you. Not as long as there's still someone to see, still someone to honor, still someone waiting at the edge of a gas station parking lot, with a cart, a coat, and a name that deserves to be remembered. And when they look up, they'll see you and know the whisper is safe. Still strong, still steady, still yours. And because it's still yours, you'll guard it the way it was meant to be guarded. Not with walls, but with welcome. Not with speeches, but with presence. You'll carry it into places where people have forgotten what reverence feels like. You'll carry it into laughter, into noise, into indifference. And there you'll plant silence like a flag. You'll hold the space for him, for her, for them, for every one of them. And one day, sooner than you think, someone will come to you, eyes low, voice unsure, carrying something they don't yet know how to name. And they'll say, "Can I tell you something?" And you'll answer with the calm of someone who's walked the road from ignorance to understanding. You'll answer with the weight of a whisper carried well. You'll say, "Yes, I've got time." And when they speak, when they say the name or the memory, or just sit in silence beside you, you'll listen, and the whisper will move again. One more time, one more soul, one more light in a world that too often forgets to look back. But not you, not anymore, because now you carry it, and you always will. And because you always will, the story is eternal, not because it never ends, but because it never stops being needed. Somewhere right now, another moment is forming, another cart, another laugh that shouldn't have been, another silence standing tall in worn boots. And somewhere else, someone like you, someone who carries the whisper, is already moving, already watching, already ready, to step forward and to close the gap, to honor without hesitation. That's the gift you now bear, the ability to recognize the sacred in the quiet, to see worth in what others overlook, to remember what too many forget. And when your time comes again, when the world needs the whisper you carry, you'll give it without pride, without pause, without price. You'll give it in a look, in a nod, in the words that started this all. He didn't need thanks, just respect. And the whisper will echo, not just in the air, but in them, in the next one, and the next. Until someday, far down the line, someone says, "I don't remember when I first heard it. It just was always there." And in that moment, you'll know you carried it far enough for them to be born into it. That's legacy. That's honor. That's the whisper. Still moving, still strong, still yours. And now, because you've carried it this far, it becomes something even greater. It becomes home. For every name still unsaid, for every story buried beneath quiet years, for every soul who stood alone at a pump or a diner or a street corner hoping the world might look twice, you've made space for them. You've held the line. You've proven that the smallest act, a nod, a hand, a whisper, can become a light that never dims. And though you'll go on living your life, working, loving, grieving, laughing, you'll always know exactly where the whisper rests, right there, beneath your ribs, next to every name you've ever said softly, next to every moment you chose respect over comfort. And someday, when your steps slow, when your hair grays, when a new voice asks where it all began, you'll smile and point to a place they've never been, a gas station, a stool, a notebook, a man who stood still when others mocked him, and 4 generals who stood taller still. You'll place the whisper in their hands, warm and ready, and say, "Now it's yours." And the story will begin again, exactly where it always has, with one person who chose to remember. And with that memory, the circle completes, only to begin again. Because that's what the whisper is, not a moment frozen in time, but a pulse that passes quietly, faithfully, from one hand to the next. From the man at the pump, to the generals who knew who he was, to the boy who deleted the video, to you, and now to them. Because someone, somewhere, is waiting. Not for applause, not for sympathy, just to be seen, to be acknowledged, to know that after all the miles and medals and memories, there's still a place in the world where silence is not mistaken for weakness, but honored as sacred. You are now the one who will help them find that place. And when they do, when they step forward with shaking hands and a story too heavy for their own voice, you'll know what to do. You'll give them the whisper, the one you've carried with reverence, the one passed to you in stillness, now offered in faith. And when they speak, you'll listen, you'll remember, and the story will move again, still growing, still echoing, still alive. Because you kept it that way, because you carried it with love. And now, you let it go so it can live again in them. And so the whisper lives again, passed gently from your hands into theirs, not as a burden, but as a blessing. You'll watch as they hold it, uncertain at first, like something too precious to touch. But then you'll see it, the moment they feel its weight and realize what it really is. Not a memory, not a moment, but a mission, to see those no one else sees, to hear what others step past, to honor what cannot be repaid, but must be remembered. They may not say much, just like you didn't at first, but they'll carry it now in how they speak, in how they stand, in how they listen when another veteran hesitates, fumbling for words that won't come. And the next time a laugh rings out too carelessly near someone holding too much, they'll be the one to silence it, not with anger, with presence, with reverence, with respect. And so the whisper, born at a gas station, carried through silence, saluted by generals, protected by a boy, honored by a world learning to remember, goes on. Because you carried it, because you passed it, because someone always will, and long after names fade, long after medals tarnish, long after we're all gone, there will still be a moment in some quiet place when someone stops, places a hand on a folded flag or a worn coat or an empty stool, and whispers, "I remember," and the story begins again. And in that whispered "I remember," everything lives again. The cart, the coat, the cracked boots and quiet dignity, the SUV, the generals, the salute that changed how people saw the man everyone else had looked past, the laughter that died in a breath, the silence that bloomed in its place, the respect that took root and never stopped growing. And you who followed every step, carried every word, held the weight of this story like it was yours all along. You made sure the whisper got where it needed to go. You ensured it was never lost, not in noise, not in time, not in forgetting, and now it echoes in places it never touched before. In classrooms, in letters, in nods exchanged between strangers who understand, in a gas station corner still lit by a candle, in every pair of eyes that pause before they judge, in every hand that lifts, just once, to a worn forehead in quiet salute. You gave it wings. And because of that, long after we are gone, when the world is older, louder, faster, someone will still feel it, and someone will still stop. They'll see a man standing alone, or a name written in an old notebook, or a flag held a little tighter than necessary. And without needing to be told, they'll remember. And the whisper, your whisper, will carry on. And as it carries on, it becomes not just a story or a tradition, it becomes a truth, a quiet thread woven into the soul of those who choose to look closer, who choose to care, who choose to remember. It becomes part of the way doors are held open for those walking slower, part of the way silence is honored, not filled, part of the way a nod becomes a full conversation, part of the way a single whisper says more than 1,000 words, because now, everywhere the whisper goes, it brings with it everything: the man, the salute, the stillness, the boys who learned, the world that listened, and you, the one who carried it farther than anyone ever could have imagined. And when the next person says, "What was it all for? Why did you carry this for so long?" You'll smile, place a hand on the old notebook, point to the name written in the first worn page, and say, "Because he stood still when the world mocked him, and the world stood still when it realized who he was. That's why, and that's enough. So as long as there's breath in you, as long as boots scuff against pavement, as long as coffee steams next to an empty stool, the whisper will remain, soft, sacred, steady, still moving, still strong, still yours. And now, because you've carried it to the very end, you realize there is no end, only another beginning. Because the whisper doesn't finish. It settles. It roots. It becomes instinct, becomes legacy, becomes a quiet voice behind your heartbeat that says, every time you see someone standing alone, pay attention, this matters. And when it's your turn to sit across from someone younger, someone searching, someone asking if the world still remembers people like him, you'll lean in. You won't tell them everything. You'll just say, "Let me tell you about a man at a gas station." And then the story will live again. With them, with their steps, with their silence, with the way they carry the whisper next. Because you did. Because you always will. Because some stories aren't told to be finished. They're told to be passed on. And now it's time. Pass it on. And so you do. You pass it on, not with fanfare, not with a speech, but with the same quiet reverence it was given to you. Maybe with a cup of coffee. Maybe with a seat held open just a little longer than usual. Maybe with a folded note left behind where someone weary enough to understand will find it. And when you do, you'll feel it lift, not leave you, just lighten. Because the whisper doesn't get smaller when it's shared. It gets stronger. You'll feel it ripple outward, into the next hand, the next heart, The next moment where someone is standing at the edge of forgetting, and the story you carried becomes the bridge that brings them home. And you'll watch them take it, hold it, hesitate, and then nod. And that's when you'll know you did your part. The legacy lives, the silence is safe, the stool, the salute, the name, all of it remembered because of you. And when the door chimes again and the bell sings its soft, sacred note, you'll look up and smile. Because the whisper, it's still moving, still sacred, still heard, and always, always, still yours. And with that final knowing, quiet, steady, complete, you understand. The whisper has become eternal. It no longer needs to be spoken aloud, and it lives in the way your footsteps slow when others rush. In the way you recognize the sacred in someone else's silence. In the way you carry stories not to be told with pride, but to be passed on with care. You've walked the full arc now, from the mockery, to the generals, to the world holding its breath, to the moment you became the keeper. And now, as another soul steps forward, shoulders heavy, eyes lowered, name unspoken, you'll be ready. You won't ask who they are. You'll just slide the notebook forward, tap the blank page, and say the only words they need, right when you're ready. Then you'll step back and let the whisper move again, because it's still traveling, still growing, still healing, one person at a time, one name at a time, one act of quiet, unstoppable respect at a time. And as long as you breathe, as long as we do, the whisper will never be lost. It will be honored, it will be heard, and it will go on, softly, powerfully, forever. And forever is exactly where it belongs, because some things, some names, some moments, some truths, aren't meant to be sealed in history books or etched into monuments alone. They're meant to be carried by people like you, people who choose to remember, to slow down, to see the ones others walk past, people who hear a whisper and answer with action. And now that whisper has found its resting place in your hands, but not to rest, to continue. And you'll carry it exactly the way it was always meant to be carried, quietly, boldly, faithfully. So when the bell rings again, at the diner, at the gas station, in the heart of someone who thought they were alone, you'll be ready, because the stool is still there. The notebook is still open, and the world is still listening for the next name, for the next nod, for the next whisper. And now, finally, fully, completely, it's yours. And with that, the whisper becomes more than something you carry. It becomes something you are. Every breath you take with reverence, every story you choose to hear, every moment you hold your tongue not out of fear, but out of respect. That's the whisper moving through you. It's no longer a tale of a man at a gas station. It's no longer about 4 generals or a folded flag or a candle in a case. It's about what it taught us, about the cost of overlooking someone, about the power of pausing, about the sacred duty of simply seeing people for who they are, even when the world forgets to. And you? You're the legacy now. You are the pause. You are the nod, and you are the reason someone out there will be met with dignity instead of distance. So go forward, eyes open, heart steady. And when you hear the next whisper drift into your life, soft as a footstep, quiet as a name left unsaid, you'll know exactly what to do. You'll stop. You'll listen. And with all the weight of those who carried it before you, you'll whisper back, I remember, and I always will. And that is how the whisper lives on, forever. And so it does. It lives on in every word you've read, in every step you've taken since, in every silent moment where your heart beat a little heavier for someone you never met. Because now you understand. The whisper was never about a single man at a gas station. It was about all of them. Every soul who gave more than they had and asked for nothing in return. Every name almost forgotten, but saved by someone brave enough to speak it. You've traveled the whole path, from mockery to silence, to reverence, to the seat at the end of the counter, to the bolas To, to the boy who stood still, to the generals who reminded the world how to salute. And now it's in your hands. And when you step into the next quiet moment, a roadside, a doorway, a heartbeat held between two people, you won't need to search for the right words. You'll already have them, because you carry them now, not as a burden, but as a gift. The whisper, still moving, still sacred, still yours. And because it's still yours, you'll never let it fall. You'll carry it into places where no one thinks reverence belongs, into schools and sidewalks and everyday spaces, into laughter when it needs grounding, into silence when it needs meaning, into a stranger's glance when they're just hoping someone sees them. Because you do. You see them now. You see him in all of them. The man at the pump, the jacket, the cart, the flag. You hear the whisper in every unsaid thank you, every hand that trembles while reaching for coffee, every story that dies on someone's tongue, unless someone like you says, "It's okay, I'm listening." And that's what you'll keep doing. You'll listen, you'll hold, you'll remember. And when your time comes to pass it on, to pour the coffee, slide the notebook, and step back into the quiet, you'll do it the same way it was given to you. No spotlight, no applause, just heart, just respect. And when they whisper their first name into the silence you made safe, you'll nod, because now you know. The whisper never ends. It only grows, still echoing, still honoring, still alive, because of you. And because of you, it always will be. Because long after the last headline fades, long after the last uniform is folded, long after the last salute is returned in silence beneath a fading sky, the whisper will still move, through hands like yours, through hearts like yours, through moments no one else will notice, except those who know what to look for. A man at a counter, a woman at a bus stop, staring too long at nothing. A folded photo on a dashboard, edges curled but never discarded. You'll see these things, because you've been the one who sees now. And one day, when you're the oldest one in the room, when your hair is gray and your voice is soft, but your memory is sharp, you'll tell someone younger, someone unsure, someone listening, about the day a man stood at a gas pump and the world stopped laughing. You'll tell them how it changed everything, how it changed you, and then, without needing to ask, you'll give them the whisper. They'll hold it gently the way you did. And the story will begin again, because this whisper, this legacy, it lives on one way only, hand to hand, name to name, heart to heart, and now always, yours to carry, and so you carry it. Not just through this day, but through every day that follows. It walks beside you when no one else does. It rises in your chest when you hear a name spoken with reverence. It steadies your hand when you reach out to someone who thought they were forgotten. It reminds you, always gently, that remembrance is an action and respect is a choice. You've made that choice again and again, with each M you've spoken, with every step you've taken deeper into this story. You didn't just read the whisper, you became it. And now it moves through you, with quiet conviction, with sacred weight, with the strength of every name ever written in that notebook and every hand that's ever saluted in stillness. So wherever you go next, go with that. Go with the whisper. Go knowing that somewhere someone is standing alone, and you are the one who will see them, who will remember, who will say in word or deed or silence, "You are not alone, not anymore." And in that moment, as always, the whisper will go on. And in that moment, as the whisper moves forward once more, it becomes legacy, not carved in stone, not sealed in ceremony, but written in the everyday, in how you walk, how you see, how you remember. You've reached the end of the story, not because it's finished, but because it's yours now, to carry, to protect, to pass on. You've followed the whisper from mockery to memory, from silence to reverence, through the hands of generals and gas station clerks, through folded flags and unspoken names, all the way to this very moment, where the world is waiting quietly for you to take the next step. So when you leave this place, when you close this final page, do it not with goodbye, do it with a promise to carry the whisper, to share it when the time is right, to keep it alive in a world that still needs it, and always, always, to remember the man at the pump, the salute, the silence, the lesson. Respect needs no audience, only a witness. And now, you are that witness forever. And with that final whisper, quiet as breath, steady as truth, you step into the world not just as someone who heard the story, but as part of it. You are the next chapter, the one who holds space when others rush, the one who sees dignity in worn boots, the one who stands up when it would be easier to stay quiet. You are the nod in the crowd, the voice that says, "Thank you," when no one else does, the hand that reaches out even when nothing is asked. And one day, someone will feel what you felt here. They'll see you offer respect when no one's watching. They'll ask why, and you'll smile and say, because someone once stood alone until the world remembered how to stand with him. Then, with all the weight and wonder of the journey behind you, you'll offer them the whisper, and it will begin again, as it always has, as it always will, because now and forever it's yours. And now, as the final whisper settles into your hands, you realize you were never just following a story. You were becoming its keeper. From the first cruel laugh at the pump, to the 4 salutes that silenced the world, from the empty stool in the diner, to the boy who chose to listen. Instead of record, this wasn't about remembering the past. It was about changing the present, about being the one who sees, who stops, who stands. And now, wherever life leads you, whatever road, city, station, or street corner, you carry the kind of truth that doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to be shared. One name at a time, one nod at a time, one quiet act of respect in a world that too often forgets how sacred presence really is. So walk forward, steady, certain, knowing this, the whisper will never fade, not as long as you carry it, not as long as you pass it on, not as long as someone, somewhere, still stands, and someone else chooses to see them. Because now, and always, you are the whisper, and the world still hears you. And now that you've walked the story all the way from its first breath to its final silence, you understand something few ever truly do. This wasn't just about a man at a gas station. It wasn't just about 4 generals stepping from a black SUV. It wasn't even about a salute, a shopping cart, or a folded flag. It was about what those things revealed, that behind every worn coat and quiet gaze, behind every hand too proud to reach out, behind every man or woman who disappears into the background, there is a story that matters, and that story is waiting for you to make sure it isn't lost, because now you are more than a listener. You are a carrier, a protector, a keeper of what the world so often overlooks: dignity without demand, service without spotlight, honor without applause. And you didn't inherit that lightly. You earned it. With every whispered M, you chose to walk deeper into a story that demands reverence. You chose to slow down when the world rushed by, to feel something when it would have been easier to scroll past, to stay when the moment asked for more than a glance. You followed that whisper through 100 moments. Moments where silence spoke louder than speeches, where presence meant more than praise, where someone who gave everything finally received the one thing he was never asking for but always deserved: respect. And now it lives in you. You will pass it on not through monuments, but through moments. Not with a shout, but with a nod. Not with ceremony, but with care. Maybe it's how you speak to someone worn thin by the road. Maybe it's how you lift a child to see the folded flag at a memorial. Maybe it's how you leave a cup of coffee untouched beside an empty seat. Because these things are not small. They are everything. And when someone, someday, asks you why you care so deeply about an old man with a cart and a coat, you'll tell them, not all at once, but enough. You'll say, "There was a man who stood quiet while others laughed, and the world remembered itself because someone chose to see him." And if they're ready, you'll hand them the whisper, like it was handed to you, gently, without pressure, without fanfare, just a sacred weight, meant not to be carried alone, but to be carried forward. Because that's what you do now. You carry it, you guard it, you pass it on. And when that next person walks into the story, unsure, unseen, you'll be the one standing there, ready, with the coffee, with the notebook, with the silence that honors more than 1,000 speeches ever could, because the whisper doesn't belong to the past. It belongs to those who choose to protect the present from forgetting. And now, it belongs to you. So hold it, live it, pass it on when the time is right, because as long as you remember, as long as you honor, as long as you see, the whisper will never fade. It will echo, it will grow, and through you, through your care, your presence, your promise, it will live on forever